Alright, now I don't feel like being negative about the United States because in many ways it is a world leader, and events that happen in the United States sort of echo onto the rest of the world. But some Americans can't understand why America itself is sort of hated, and why some people from other cultures call Americans stupid. Now, I have a perfect example of American stupidity in the fucking extreme. I've seen a few videos that may describe that, including one guy talking about a bus driver who survived many dangerous things in Northern Ireland, who then followed on and said, "I had no idea the UK was so dangerous." Dude, you're in your 30s. If you've never heard of the North Ireland conflict, you've got a very closed world. And that is why, internationally, some Americans, or some people, don't like Americans. It is because of their sheer, absolute, shockingly low knowledge of anything outside of America, the United States specifically. You know, some Americans don't understand basic things about Canada that I understand, because a lot of the Canadian political and social structure is very similar to Australia, as multiple former British colonies are fairly similar in their structure. It's amazing that these places are sometimes, you know, only a few miles that way, and yet you've got Americans who don't really quite understand it, because it's just this bubble. You know, this is why they sometimes refer to things as Planet America, because they're on their own little world, you know. Now, I have, aside from the guy making the video on Northern Ireland, my sister has a friend whose father is American and mother is Australian, and they live over here. But she grew up with her initial days, you know, in the United States, and on occasion goes back. And she has had girls in America, American teenage girls, ask her that when she was born, they assumed she was born with the American accent, and she had to learn the Australian accent, because everybody knows that white people are born with an American accent. Holy smoke! Some white people are born speaking German or French. You think if a Spanish baby was brought up in an English household from the day of its birth, it might come out speaking like a Mexican? What is it? What are you fucking insane? I know they're only teenage girls, but just this sort of ridiculous shit is unbelievable. Now, I have a video on my screen right now, and I'm claiming fair use under the section of law that I can't remember, showing... oh man, I tell you what, this girl probably shouldn't set foot back in the country if anybody has watched this sort of stuff, because... oh, they're happy people, but someone will have to slap her for what she's about to say. She's talking about learning Bislama as a Mormon. Now, Bislama essentially is Pidgin English. It's basically more or less identical to Solomon Islands Pidgin English. There's just a couple of words that they say a little bit longer, and in effect it's more or less just a change of accent that means these words are said in a slightly longer form. There's only about 4 words that are said in a slightly longer form. You know, belong becomes the word belong, which they use a lot because it's simplified grammar with Pidgin English. Instead of saying belong, they say blong for Vanuatu. But in the Solomon Islands, they'll say blo. And essentially, they're the same thing. It's just a little bit of a shortened, quicker, rougher version in Solomon Islands than it is in Vanuatu. Vanuatu's a lot clearer, and it's just a harder accent to understand in the Solomon Islands. And Papua New Guinea, there's a whole, it changes again. It gets a fair bit more complicated. It runs along similar lines, but it is a bit more complicated. But once again, it's just another form of Pidgin English. Now look at the insulting, brainless shit coming out of this Mormon girl from the United States.
In Vanuatu, they speak a language called Bislama. Now, on your mission call, it will say that you...
What it'll also say is you've got slow internet speed. I might throw this back to a small screen.
Will prepare to teach the gospel in the English language. That is a lie.
No. What's a lie is that you are too stupid to understand that there's any more than one version of English in the world. So you've even got African Pidgin English, which is very, very close to real English. But you got words like the chup, which is the food, and there's just a few basic ones where they've grabbed local African words. This is more prevalent in Nigeria, but chop is, food, and there's a couple other things. Honestly, there's about 8 words that are different, and the rest is just the same. That's no different from, there's a huge amount of areas where kakai or kai is food. This ranges from basically Papua New Guinea right through all of Polynesia, right through to Samoa, including Tonga, New Zealand, the Maori language. Kai is food. And there's a fairly common thing, and even Aboriginals do it too, where instead of saying it once, they'll say the same thing twice. So it'll be kai in, in Maori or in Samoan, but by the time you get to Solomon Islands and New Guinea and stuff like that, it's kai. And you'll notice Aboriginal language, they have things where they double up, they say the same word sort of twice. But Aboriginal is not Pidgin English in the least. It's of course a native. There's about 100 different versions, at least 62 different versions of Aboriginal, but it depends on how varied you want to spread out those versions. There are people that claim that Aboriginals have a language, English version of their own, but it's just that they sometimes speak English a little bit, rougher, a bit like I didn't do nothing type thing. That sort of a double negatives and stuff like that. But you got to realise there's about 5 common, might even be as high as 8 common local languages in Solomon Islands as well. But to say it's a lie is bullshit, because these languages were developed in the state of Queensland, Australia, when they were working their pick and sugar cane. And, that was what they done in the days, to get them to understand. So they learnt a bashed up form of English that worked out between the people who were hiring them, who own sugarcane fields in Queensland, of which quite a number of them have stayed in Australia around the Bundaberg area, and still live there to this day. And that's the version that worked for them, and missionaries and whatnot, but here, I will take it from an American, it's a lie.
In Vanuatu, they have 3 different, in the Vanuatu Port Viewland mission, they have 3 different countries within the mission. There's the Solomon Islands, where they speak Pidgin English. Vanuatu, where they speak Bislama.
Same bloody thing. Well, we couldn't work that out. Now, if you go to New Guinea, they call it Tok Pisin. Tok Pidgin. Tok Pisin. So it's just an accent change, but this is actually a bit different. It's not horrendously different, but it's enough to sort of complicate you a little bit. Or
one of their other many languages. And then New Caledonia, where they speak French. If you are called to serve...
Okay, rightio. Well, she also missed there the fact that they speak French in Vanuatu as well as New Caledonia. In fact, you have quite a number of French banks based there, because Vanuatu is very well known and has been since the 1970s, as a tax haven. And, you know, when you actually split up the islands that are in Vanuatu, the southern half of them were, or the ones in the south, were owned by France, and they had the ones in the north owned by England. And eventually, when they got independence, they just sort of all come together as one because they were relatively close distance. But it was one of the areas where, you know, both colonial powers of France and England sort of held a very close area.
In New Caledonia, you will go to the MTC to learn French. The other two islands, you will be called to speak English, but you won't speak that language, and you will be learning that.
No, you're speaking that language. You're just too bloody lame and too dumb to realise that it's English. Now wait, here comes the good part, the insults.
Those languages while you are in the field. I would recommend picking up a Beslama Book of Mormon if possible at one of the distribution centers, or if you could order it online. Just practicing, trying to sound out a few of the words helps me a little bit, and kind of prepare you for what lies ahead. A lot.
You know, look, you can get the basics of it together in one fucking afternoon. You know, you like maybe not one afternoon, maybe about 3 days. And I have, and I did.
A lot of Beslama is, there are English words mixed in, and so I would say...
Oh, hang on. So you're telling me there's words mixed in? English words mixed in?
A little bit, and kind of prepare you for what lies ahead. A lot of Beslama is, there are English words mixed in, and so I would say when I first got there I could understand maybe 30% of what was going on.
Yeah, 30% of going on, because that was like just general run-of-the-mill American English. Because you got to understand what was going on, because what you were too dumb to realise is, realistically speaking, there are no real changes in words, there's just a heavier accent. The only changes in words there are ones that are taken from native language, which are just basic things like food, kai or kai, family. There's also ones that mean children. There's a few ones that are taken, so I should remember some of these because I bloody knew all this stuff. Pickaninny. Pickaninny is children. Kai is, or kai is food. Forget what a few of the other ones. They've got quite a bit of a range of ones indicating relatives too, you know, uncles, aunts, stuff like that, that isn't actually English, but it's no big deal.
But I did convince myself within the first week that Beslama was not a real language, and that nobody actually knew what anybody was saying, and everybody was just guessing what was going on. Okay, let's hear that again. That is fucking incredible. This is your arrogance. This is where she'd get slapped in the bloody face. What lies ahead. A lot of Beslama is, there are English words mixed in, and so I would say when I first got there I could understand maybe 30% of what was going on. But I did convince myself within the first week that Beslama was not a real language, and that nobody actually knew what anybody was saying, and everybody was just guessing what was going on. That's not...
Okay, she convinced herself that it was not a real language, and nobody knew what was going on, and everybody was just working out what everyone was saying. Oh, rightio. Well, what if they decide that Mormon isn't a real religion, the USA doesn't exist, and French isn't a real language either? Ah, what a fucking insult. Nobody knew what each other was talking about. What are you fucking talking about? They've been speaking this shit for like over 100 years, for fuck's sake. It's like 130, 40 years they've been speaking this crap. You know, and you're sitting there, oh, it's not a real language. Well, maybe we've decided that your passport is not a real passport, so we're chucking your passport in the fucking fire, and now you're stuck here for the rest of your life, bitch. What the fuck? Hell, is this woman going to go to Mexico and decide that Spanish isn't a real language? Why don't you tell that to the fucking mayor of Tijuana, or something like that? Well, I've decided Spanish isn't a real language. What else are you going to decide isn't real? What if they decide that, you know, your English isn't a real language and it's just fucked up pidgin English? Eh? That'd be a good one, wouldn't it?
Not true. It is a language, and
oh, it is a language.
within a few months you should be able to understand. And everybody was just guessing what was going on. That's not true. It is a language, and within a few months you should be able to understand and be able to speak the language.
No, you should be 100% fluent in under 3 weeks. If you're landing there and you can't fluently speak it within 3 weeks, they should just, just send you back into that little plastic bubble that you come from and tell you never to step foot outside the United States because you're too dumb. Honestly, if you can't grasp that language within 3 weeks, your brains are rotten because it is literally 90% English with a fairly mashed up grammar. And if you can't understand that bit of a change in grammar, because this change in grammar makes it simple for people to understand, by reducing the amount of words that are used, and basically your tenses, your past, your present tense, a lot of that crap is thrown out the window. Also your plurals are thrown out the window for the pure purpose of simplifying. Now there are ways that they do deal with the tense, but instead of having, each word change for the tense, they just say the word and then it's followed by before or followed by after or followed by something like that. Or sometimes it's prefix, it's ahead of it, if you know it's before or current or after. And often they use, I think it's current and after are the same damn tense. And they only tell you if you, there's a particular one where you, what is it? It's on the tip of my tongue. Suppose you go to market, me fella come too, which basically means suppose you go to the market. If you're going to the market, me fella, me and my associates, are going to go with you, basically. And this is, it's just, I picked up the basics of Spanish with 2 months of self-teaching, and I can still now, 2 years later, this is like the end of, holy shit, what was it? Like the end of fucking 2017, and 2 years later I can still watch and understand good chunks of Spanish videos on YouTube, and it was a lousy couple of weeks of self-taught,
Language.
Anyway, I discovered it is a real language. Yeah, well, thank God you discovered it was a real language. One of these days you might actually find that, that booger's coming out of your nose was something that's real as well. I mean, fuck me. I tell you what, there's some people that the rest of the earth needs to be spared from, and I think she'd be a prime example. It's just, my God, if you're that dumb about the rest of the planet, don't go insulting American intelligence by you going overseas and accusing people who are speaking English they learnt in fucking Australia of not, not speaking a real language because it's not your polished little stuff that you have in your little world, I mean, you've got to go to England, Ireland and Scotland, particularly some white trash areas of Scotland, and you will see English that's probably more fucked up than you'll see in Vanuatu. I think it's easier to understand some pidgin English than understand some really hard versions of Scottish accents, and I have watched stuff that it was actually easier for me to understand Vanuatu pidgin English, which is a clearer version of the versions of pidgin English than it is to understand some of these Scottish people, honestly. But anyway, that's the sort of brains that you don't want on display as an example of an Americanism outside of America. That's the sort of brains and ignorance that you don't want representing you internationally.